Why does God test your faith? Most believers ask this question in their darkest moments. When everything falls apart. When prayers seem to go unanswered. When circumstances scream that God doesn't care. In those moments, people don't realize what's actually happening. God is testing their faith. But this isn't punishment. This isn't abandonment. This is investment. God tests faith the way a jeweler tests gold. He applies heat. He applies pressure. He refines. And what emerges is something infinitely more valuable than what went in. Today, we're uncovering 7 shocking signs God is testing your faith, the unmistakable markers that reveal you're in a season of divine refinement. These are the indicators that prove God hasn't forgotten you. In fact, the opposite is true. He's paying such close attention to you that He's personally orchestrating your spiritual development. If you've been struggling, confused, or questioning whether God is real, this message is for you. Because what looks like God's silence might actually be God's most intentional work in your life. By the end of this video, you'll understand why your faith is being tested. You'll recognize the signs. And you'll have the spiritual tools to pass the test and emerge stronger than ever. Stay until the very end. The final sign might transform how you view your current struggle. Let's begin. The first shocking sign that God is testing your faith is this: your prayers seem to go completely unanswered. You've been praying for months, maybe years. You've prayed about the same situation over and over. You've fasted. You've interceded. You've declared Scripture. You've believed. And yet, silence. Radio silence. God seems completely absent. Your prayers hit the ceiling and bounce back down with no response. This is one of the most painful experiences a believer can have. Because silence from God feels like rejection from God. And when you feel rejected by God, faith becomes impossible. But here's the shocking truth. This silence is intentional. This is a test. God is not absent when He's silent. He's present and testing. He's asking you the most fundamental question of faith. Do you believe in me even when I don't answer? Do you trust me even when I can't see evidence of my care? Will you maintain faith when faith makes absolutely no sense? Listen to what Hebrews 11 verse 1 says. Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. Notice that word, unseen. Real faith is faith in the unseen. Faith that doesn't require evidence. Faith that doesn't demand answers. And that's exactly what God is testing right now. Consider the story of Abraham and Sarah. God promised them a son. Abraham believed. But then decade after decade passed. No son. Sarah became postmenopausal. It was biologically impossible. Yet God kept silent. Abraham's prayers seemed to go unanswered year after year. But Abraham maintained faith anyway. Why? Because his faith wasn't based on answers, it was based on God's character. Romans 4 verses 18 to 21. Here's what's happening in your life right now. God is silent because He wants your faith to mature beyond needing answers. He wants you to trust Him not because of what He does, but because of who He is. He wants to develop in you a faith so deep that it doesn't require constant communication to survive. The conviction is real. Most believers quit praying when their prayers go unanswered. They interpret silence as no. They stop believing. They stop interceding. And they miss the moment when God was about to answer, because He was waiting to see if their faith would survive the silence. So ask yourself, will you maintain faith even when God seems completely silent? But the second sign reveals something that makes most believers angry, because it feels like betrayal. The second shocking sign that God is testing your faith is this: people you deeply trusted betray you or disappoint you in profound ways. This is brutal, because when circumstances are hard, you lean on people. You find community. You build relationships. You trust specific people, and then those exact people let you down. They hurt you. They abandon you. They betray you. Or they simply aren't there when you need them most. When this happens, the pain isn't just about the betrayal. It's about the loss of your support system. And without support, faith feels impossible. But this is precisely why God allows these betrayals, because He wants your faith to be in Him, not in people. Listen to what Psalm 146 verses 3 to 4 says, "Do not put your trust in princes, in human beings, who cannot save. When their spirit departs, they return to the ground. On that very day their plans come to nothing." God is warning us, don't build your faith on people. People fail. People die. People disappoint. If your faith is built on people, it will crumble when people fail. Think about Peter. Jesus was his closest companion, his mentor, his spiritual father. But when Jesus was arrested, Peter didn't just abandon Jesus. He denied even knowing Him. 3 times. He cursed and swore that he didn't know Jesus. Matthew 26 verses 69 to 75. Imagine how painful that must have been for Peter. His faith in people was shattered. But here's what happened next. Peter's faith shifted from being in Jesus the person to being in Jesus the risen Lord. His faith became deeper, more mature, and more resilient, because it was no longer dependent on proximity or emotional connection. It was based on resurrection power, 1 Peter 1 verse 3. Right now, God might be allowing people to disappoint you specifically so you'll stop leaning on them and start leaning entirely on Him. He's breaking your dependency on human support so He can become your ultimate support system. The question for you is, will you allow people's disappointment to destroy your faith in God, or will you use it as a catalyst to trust God more deeply? But the third sign is where the test becomes even more intense. The third shocking sign that God is testing your faith is this: your circumstances actually get worse before they show any signs of improvement. You've been praying for change. You've been believing for breakthrough. You've been trusting God. And then, things deteriorate. Your financial situation worsens. Your health declines. Your relationships become more strained. Your circumstances become more complicated, not less. This is confusing. You think, if God is with me, why is everything getting harder? You wonder if you misunderstood God's will. You question if you did something wrong. You doubt whether God is actually listening. But this pattern, where circumstances worsen before they improve, is actually a hallmark of faith testing. Because God is testing whether you'll maintain faith when circumstances give you zero reason to believe. Listen to what James 1 verses 2 to 4 says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." Notice the progression. Trials test faith. Faith tested produces perseverance. Perseverance produces maturity. But maturity only comes through the full cycle. It doesn't happen when things get better. It happens while things are still hard. Consider Job. His circumstances didn't just stay bad, they got exponentially worse. He lost his wealth. He lost his children. He lost his health. His circumstances deteriorated catastrophically. His friends told him he must have sinned. His wife told him to curse God and die. Everything in his external reality was screaming, "God has abandoned you." But Job maintained faith. Not because his circumstances improved, but despite his circumstances deteriorating. And when Job's faith survived the absolute worst, God restored everything and gave him double. Job 42 verses 10 to 12. Here's the spiritual principle. God often lets circumstances get darker before He brings light. Why? Because a faith that only survives when things are good isn't real faith. Real faith survives in darkness. Real faith thrives in difficulty. And that's what God is building in you right now. The question is, will you maintain faith even though circumstances are worsening, or will you let circumstances dictate your belief? But the fourth sign is where your inner world becomes the test. The fourth shocking sign that God is testing your faith is this. Doubts arise that you've never experienced before, doubts so powerful they shake the foundations of what you believe. Maybe you start doubting if God even exists. Maybe you wonder if the Bible is actually true. Maybe you question if Jesus is really who he claimed to be. Maybe you doubt if prayer actually works. These aren't small doubts. These are foundational doubts. Doubts that make you question everything you've built your life on. And they're terrifying. Because if these doubts are true, then your entire life has been built on a lie. Your faith is worthless. Your sacrifices were meaningless. Everything collapses. But here's the shocking truth. These doubts are a sign that God is testing your faith at its deepest level. Because surface faith doesn't need to be tested. But core faith, faith at the absolute foundation, that needs to be examined, questioned, and ultimately proven true. And that only happens when you face doubts so powerful that you're forced to either abandon your faith or recommit to it at a deeper level. Listen to what Jude 1 verses 22 to 23 says, "Be merciful to those who doubt. Save others by snatching them from the fire. To others show mercy, mixed with fear." The Bible acknowledges that doubt is part of the faith journey. It's not sin. It's not failure. It's a testing ground. Think about Thomas. After Jesus rose from the dead, the other disciples reported it to Thomas. And Thomas responded with doubt. He said, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." John 20 verse 25. Thomas was experiencing foundational doubt. But Jesus didn't condemn Thomas for his doubt. Instead, Jesus appeared to Thomas. Jesus met Thomas in his doubt. And Thomas's doubt became the catalyst for the deepest declaration of faith in the entire New Testament. Thomas said, "My Lord and my God," John 20 verse 28. His doubt forced him to a place where his faith became unshakable. Right now, the doubts you're experiencing aren't a sign that something is wrong with you. They're a sign that God is taking your faith seriously. He's inviting you into the deeper places of belief. He's asking you to choose faith not because it's comfortable, but because it's true. The question is, will you allow doubt to destroy your faith, or will you use doubt as a catalyst to examine and ultimately recommit to your faith more deeply? But the fifth sign is where the test becomes physical and tangible. The fifth shocking sign that God is testing your faith is this: your physical body or your health is directly affected by the test. This might be stress-related illness. This might be exhaustion. This might be actual disease or injury. This might be a chronic condition that worsens. Whatever it is, your body is suffering. And when your body suffers, faith becomes physically difficult. It's hard to pray when you're in pain. It's hard to worship when you're exhausted. It's hard to believe when your body is failing you. Physical suffering can shake faith in ways that emotional or circumstantial suffering sometimes cannot. But this is exactly why God allows it, because faith that only survives in comfort isn't real faith. Real faith survives in physical pain. Listen to what 2 Corinthians 12 verses 9 to 10 says, "But he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness.' Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for the sake of Christ, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong." Paul is saying something radical. Your weakness is the exact place where God's power becomes most evident. Your physical suffering is actually creating space for divine power to work. Consider Peter. Jesus predicted that Peter would be crucified upside down. Peter's body would be tortured. His faith would be tested through physical suffering, John 21 verses 18 to 19. And according to church history, that's exactly what happened. But Peter's faith survived. His faith actually deepened through the physical suffering. Right now, if your body is suffering, God isn't being cruel. He's inviting you into the deepest places of faith, the places where physical pain forces you to transcend physical reality and connect with spiritual reality. The question is, will you maintain faith and worship even when your body is suffering, or will you let physical pain disconnect you from God? But the sixth sign is where you discover something beautiful about your faith. The sixth shocking sign that God is testing your faith is this: you suddenly recognize that your faith has become mature in ways you never expected. This is the pivot point in the test. This is where you start to see what God has been building all along. The silence didn't destroy you, it deepened your prayer life. The betrayals didn't break you, they transferred your trust to God. The worsening circumstances didn't defeat you, they forced you to rely on God's character rather than circumstances. The doubts didn't eliminate your faith, they rooted your faith in bedrock truth. The physical suffering didn't separate you from God, it connected you to God in ways comfort never could. And suddenly, you realize, your faith is different now. It's stronger. It's purer. It's more resilient. This is what Psalm 23 verse 5 describes. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Notice that the enemies are still present. The difficulty is still there. But now there's provision. There's blessing. There's overflow. The test hasn't ended, but you're no longer surviving the test. You're thriving in spite of it. Think about Job again. After his faith survived the ultimate test, he said, "My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you." Job 42 verse 5. His faith wasn't theoretical anymore. It was experiential. He didn't believe about God. He knew God. Right now, if you're recognizing that your faith has matured, that's a sign you're nearing the end of this particular test. God has accomplished what He set out to do. Your faith has been refined. Your character has been developed. You've become who God needed you to become. The question is, will you acknowledge and celebrate the maturity God has built into your faith during this season? But the seventh sign is where the test transforms into victory. The seventh and final shocking sign that God is testing your faith is this: God's vindication begins to appear, not always in grand ways, but in undeniable ways. After the test, vindication comes. Not vindication that proves you were right and your enemies were wrong, but vindication that proves God was faithful all along. Vindication that proves your faith was justified. Vindication that proves God never abandoned you. This vindication might come slowly. It might not be dramatic, but it's undeniable. Doors start opening. Circumstances start shifting. Prayers start getting answered. People start apologizing. Your health starts improving. Your finances start stabilizing. The fog lifts. But here's the important part. The vindication isn't what makes your faith valid. Your faith was valid during the test, when there was zero evidence of vindication. The vindication is simply God saying, "I told you so." Your faith was well placed. Listen to what 1 Peter 1 verses 6 to 7 says, "In all this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed." The vindication doesn't create your faith. Your faith during the test is what's valuable. The vindication is simply the moment when everyone, including you, sees that your faith was genuine. Consider the story of Esther. She faced a test where her very survival was threatened. She had to risk everything to save her people. Her faith was tested to the absolute limit. But then vindication came. Not only did she survive, but she was elevated to a position of influence. Her faith wasn't vindicated because of the elevation. Her faith was vindicated during the threat. The elevation was simply the visible manifestation of what had already been decided in the spiritual realm, Esther 7-8. Right now, if you're starting to see signs of vindication, it means God has accomplished His purpose in this test. Your faith has been refined. Your character has been developed. Your trust has been deepened. And now God is releasing the blessing that comes to those whose faith survives the fire. The final question is, will you recognize this vindication as God's affirmation of the faith you maintained during the test? Everything we've discussed today points to one undeniable truth. God is testing your faith not because He's cruel, but because He's committed to your spiritual development. The unanswered prayers, that's God refining your faith. The betrayals, that's God transferring your trust to Him. The worsening circumstances, that's God forcing you to rely on His character. The doubts, that's God inviting you into deeper belief. The physical suffering, that's God creating space for His power. The maturity you're recognizing, that's God's work. And the vindication beginning to appear, that's God saying, your faith was justified all along. You're not being punished. You're being refined. You're not being abandoned. You're being invested in. Every element of this test has been specifically designed to make your faith stronger, purer, and more unshakable. And here's the beautiful truth. The test doesn't last forever. There is an end. There is victory. There is vindication. And when you emerge from this season, you'll be a different person. Your faith will be gold-tested. Your character will be unshakable. Your trust in God will be absolute. Here's a prayer for you. Lord, I understand now. You're not punishing me, you're refining me. Every unanswered prayer, every betrayal, every difficulty, every doubt, every physical pain, it's all part of your plan to develop my faith into something unbreakable. I choose to maintain faith during this test. I choose to trust you even when I can't see you. I choose to believe even when belief makes no sense. And I thank you for the faith you're building in me. In Jesus' name, Amen. If this message spoke to you, type in the comments, "My faith is being refined." Share this with someone who is currently in the test and needs to know that God hasn't abandoned them. Your test is temporary. Your faith is eternal. And God's faithfulness is absolute.